And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports HQ. A lot to get to. We'll be previewing and picking some of the biggest games of the weekend. Tom Fornelli and Dennis Dodd will join us. Dennis is in Columbus in advance of Ohio State and Michigan State, one of the biggest games of the weekend, a top 10 matchup. And Dennis caught up with Ohio State coach Ryan Day.
Ryan, the last time we were here, the Oregon game, there was a bit of the sky falling. What has gone right since then?
Well, I think we've had a young team that's grown up. That didn't happen overnight. We now have 10 games under our belt with a lot of inexperienced players coming into the season, and it's been good. And we've learned a lot. It's good to be around a team that has some scars on them and a little callus on them. We've kind of been in close games. We've been in lopsided games, and we've lost a game. So the good news is I think we've seen a lot going into November, but this is when we have to play our best football.
How has C.J. Stroud matured?
Well, first off, he's thrown his first college football pass in the first game of the year. He's done a lot of firsts, but now again that he's got, I guess, 9 games under his belt, you've seen somebody who's starting to just feel more comfortable with the week in and week out preparation, understanding what it takes to win games. And I've been impressed with his preparation on a weekly basis.
People want to make this your greatest supposed strength, passing against their weakness, pass defense. It's much more than that, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is more about just winning the game and striking a balance, especially in November. If you get too one-sided, you put yourself at risk of getting beat. So we've tried to make sure we get that balance. Sometimes painstakingly at times, but in order to win championships, you have to be able to run the football, and in order to be able to win national championships, you have to be able to throw the ball. And so we are constantly looking for that balance. But at the end of the day, we're going to do whatever it takes to win the game.
Speaking of running the ball, Kenneth Walker III obviously is a fantastic talent. What do you have to do to slow him down and secondarily control the clock and keep the ball away from you guys?
Well, that's what they try to do. They try to control the game with the run game, and they've done a very good job of that. And Walker's a very, very good back, and so it's a big challenge for our defense. But I think the key is defeating blocks. If at some point you're in a one-on-one situation, if you can get off the blocks, run to the ball, and get multiple people to the ball carrier, then you got a chance.
Good. Thanks, Ryan.
There, you got it. Right.
Now, as is Dennis Dodd live from Columbus. So you brought up something very interesting in that interview with Coach Day. I'd like to get both of your opinions on this, but Dennis, I'll let you go first. Do you buy into this narrative that this Ohio State team is a different team than it was against Oregon early in the year?
Oh, they're certainly different. I was at that game, as I mentioned, and they got worked that day. They got worked physically. They got worked strategically. The left side of the Oregon line that day was just wiping out the right side. Zach Hamilton, Tyreek Smith did not have a good day. C.J. Verdell, who's now out for the season, was fantastic. Anthony Brown found a lot of room throwing and passing, and that was kind of the subject of the day because they got schemed. But the rest of the year, they did get better, as Ryan Day mentioned. They got a lot of calluses, a lot of sores. They're kind of healed up from those, and it's made them tougher. Yeah, we've seen what they've done, at least offensively. Now, against Purdue, 31 points, 477 yards. There's been a lot of that on this defense, but they've definitely gotten better. C.J. Stroud, I know we're going to talk about him. Heisman leader, more than a Heisman candidate, could clinch the sucker tomorrow if he has a big game against Michigan State.
Yeah, I think that this is definitely a team that has grown. As Ryan Day said in the interview, they're a young team that's still kind of learning how to be Ohio State and play football. But I think another big change from that Oregon game to what we've seen now is the change they made at defensive coordinator with who's calling the plays on the defensive side of the ball. And what you see from Ohio State now, it's not like they've overhauled the entire defense, but I felt like early in the season they were a bit too predictable and a bit too easy for quarterbacks to read and diagnose pre-snap. And I think they've done a better job of disguising things and mixing some stuff up. But as Dennis just went over with the numbers against Purdue, when they face an explosive offense that's capable of both running and passing the ball, they do still struggle a bit. This is not the same kind of elite Ohio State defense we've seen in recent years, particularly on the back end, where that secondary is still having some problems.
So where do you see the opportunities, Tom, for Michigan State to try to get Kenneth Walker going, to try and find ways, but we'll get to picks here in just a little bit, but just looking at the different matchups, the X's and O's, the different ways that the offense and defense line up against each other for both teams, where do you see the opportunities for Sparty to be able to get in and have enough success to make this thing really interesting? Because on paper it's a top 10 matchup, and in the odds makers' eyes this is a 3-score game, so there's some disconnect there. And again, don't give your pick yet, but at least, how do you see all of this lining up?
I don't think Michigan State really needs to change anything up from what they've been doing offensively all season long. Obviously, Kenneth Walker is the focal point of their offense. He's the engine. He's the one that puts together the big plays and gets them going. And they're going to need Kenneth Walker to have a big game on the road if they're going to keep, stay in this game and potentially win it to go on and get to the Big Ten championship game. So I think you're going to stick to that game plan. You're going to try to beat Ohio State in the trenches. That is not an easy thing to do, but as Dennis was talking about in that Oregon game, you can do it if you do it right, you scheme it right. And I think that Kenneth Walker, to his credit, he's a guy that you've seen a lot of times get kind of caught up in the offensive line when there's not a hole there. But he doesn't give up on plays. The legs keep going. He's constantly looking for openings. And when he finds them, that's when those big plays happen. So if I'm Ohio State, I think the game plan is I've got to tackle. I've got to fly to the ball. I've got to have multiple guys there. I cannot give Kenneth Walker room to get away, because when he does, as we've seen time and time again, he's hard to catch from behind.
The very definition of a shootout is that teams go tete-a-tete. They score against each other and answer scores. I think this is what this is going to be about. And I do like Ohio State, but I do like Michigan State under the number because they are sneaky balanced on offense. Peyton Thorne is throwing for 258 yards per game. They actually rush for less than 200 yards per game, even though they have the best running back perhaps in the country, and Kenneth Walker, and Tom alluded to it. I don't see any Michigan State offensive linemen on All-America lists or even all Big Ten lists. I'm sure there are, but I haven't heard that name. Here's the guy that's bringing Kenneth Walker loose. The reason is he doesn't need much room. He's so good on the second level. I remember that first touchdown against Michigan where he just bounced outside and outran everybody. Michigan State didn't particularly block it up. He just saw holes. And so if they keep him from getting to the second level, and Ryan Day mentioned it, very simple, guys to the ball, helmets to the ball, multiple guys on him. If he gets to that second level, guys, he's gone. Or for a big gain. Michigan didn't do a very good job with him with those 5 touchdowns, but he gets into that second level, he's special. So I think it's going to be a shootout. There's going to be plenty of yards on both sides. Probably Ohio State's more elite on offense, but as we've seen, they don't do a very good job sometimes of stopping the opposition.
All right, so hold on, Dennis. Let me hold your feet to the fire here and go ahead and get us starting with our official pick. So I'm hearing a lot of momentum for Ohio State being able to win this game outright, but it could be closer. Maybe you're attacking the total. We're 19 on the point spread, 68.5 for the over/under. What is your best bet for Ohio State and Michigan State?
Yeah, I like Michigan State taking the points and running to the bank with that. As I wrote about this week, one of the side exits, one of the sidebars of the superhighway matchup is that the Heisman winner may come out of this. We're going to be featuring C.J. Stroud and Kenneth Walker III. If either of those has a mediocre or bad game, that's bad news for the other team. Now, I'm being simplistic. The Ohio State receivers are the best in the country. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, the others. So that's going to be different. But again, Michigan State is sneaky good on offense. They're going to put up points. And if Ohio State contributes to the effort with a couple of turnovers, it may be closer than you think. But I like the over. I like a shootout, and I like Michigan State with the points.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dennis. I'm on Michigan State, the points here, too. I think that last week, if we look at the Buckeyes, that was probably the best game from start to finish that they've played all season. Everything on offense was clicking. The defense didn't play spectacular. They did allow 31 points, but it was a game that the Buckeyes were in control of from the entire 60 minutes. And I just don't know if they could do that 2 weeks in a row because they haven't really shown us many indications of the ability to do that. They have kind of played with their food at times this season and allowed some teams that you would think that there's a lot better than to stick around. And Michigan State is a very good football team. It has an explosive offense. It's capable of keeping it close. And the one thing that I worry about with the Ohio State matchup here against these Spartans is defensively, Michigan State's numbers overall are not fantastic, but when they get in the red zone, they are one of the best red zone defenses in keeping opponents to field goals in the country. And Ohio State its biggest detriment on offense, the place where it struggled the most, is inside the red zone. So that works against the Buckeyes. And then another trend, Chip, that you and I have talked about this week, it's the week before the Michigan game. And I know that this is a huge top 10 matchup against Michigan State where the division is on the line, but it's not a coincidence that the last 7 years in which the Michigan-Ohio State game is played, Ohio State has failed to cover the spread for 7 straight seasons in this game. So I'm going to take the Spartans.
1, 2, 3. UNITY. UNITY. Go ahead and drop that confetti because we are all on Michigan State plus 19. Gentlemen, this line is disrespectful. It is disrespectful to the $95 or $96 million that Michigan State is reportedly set to pull together to make sure that Mel Tucker doesn't go take one of these big high-profile jobs. We're talking about the man who played at Wisconsin, who started his coaching career at Michigan State, who really believes in the Big Ten and believes that Michigan State is an iconic piece of the Big Ten landscape. You think he's going to let the Spartans get blown out of the water here in this game? No, Ohio State is the bar that Mel Tucker measures his Spartans program. Will Ohio State win? I believe Ohio State will win. But will it be easy? No way. I think that Michigan State will be incredibly motivated, well prepared, and have something for Ryan Day's Buckeyes. And in addition to the look ahead spot for Michigan that Ohio State faces, Ohio State also against Penn State, played into that familiar Ohio State script of you think they're 3 touchdowns better. The numbers tell you they're 3 touchdowns better. But when they actually get into the game, it gets a little bit conservative. Those red zone woes that Tom talked about start to pop up. So I see Michigan State being able to keep this thing very interesting all the way down the stretch. All 3 of us on the Spartans plus 19. All right, one more question, Dennis, before we let you go. And Tom, I want to get your opinion here too. This game is massive for the college football playoff picture. Michigan goes up to play Maryland and then the game against Ohio State. Given everything that's going on within this conference and nationally, how do you see the Big Ten's college football playoff future?
Well, you can kind of pencil in a Big Ten team right now into the playoff, but let's not forget, there's going to be a champion there with 1 loss, it looks like. But both of these things can be true. They can have no teams in. They could have 2 teams in. If Michigan State wins this game, that likelihood gets a little bit more, in play. Not likely, but maybe. They can also have no teams in the playoff. If these next 2 weeks everybody beats each other and everybody has 2 losses, then the Big Ten is out of it. The norm is Ohio State or somebody's going to win out with 1 loss, and you're going to have 1 loss Big Ten champion. There's no way they don't get left out. You can pencil in Georgia right now, win or lose to Alabama. They're going to be in. The only question is, okay, the Big Ten, and then you've got 2 other spots. I don't want to go too deep on this, but I think Cincinnati has to feel pretty good after week 1. When I wrote them off, and a lot of other people did, they had threats not only from above but below. Oklahoma and Wake Forest, well, they both lost a game. Cincinnati's got a shot here, and the shot is, let's not forget, tomorrow, Oregon playing at Utah, which is an absolute pit, especially at night in a primetime game. If they lose, that opens up a spot. And who's in competition with Cincinnati? A 1-loss Big Ten team, a Notre Dame team that they beat, a second team maybe from the Big Ten. It starts to look pretty good for Cincinnati. I went down that rabbit hole. Tom, go ahead.
I think that honestly, I think the Big Ten will probably get one in, but I do agree with you, Dennis. Like the disaster scenario where the Big Ten ends up without anybody in the playoff, I think is more likely than most people realize at this point. But I do think the most likely scenario is that Ohio State beats Michigan State, beats Michigan, and then beats Wisconsin or Iowa in the Big Ten championship and ends up in the playoff, because as many good teams as there are in the Big Ten right now, and as many teams that they have ranked in the top 10, Ohio State is the most complete of them, both more balanced on offense than both, and then it's got a good defense too. And I think that kind of combination, plus the talent and plus the talent alone at that receiver position, which, as Ryan Day said in the interview with Dennis, you got to run the ball to win games. You got to throw the ball to win titles. That's where Ohio State has the edge over both Michigan and Michigan State, and that's why I think they're the most likely candidate.
Yeah, I love that take from Ryan Day about running the ball and passing the ball. I'm definitely going to steal that. I'll have to credit him, of course. And Dennis Dodd for getting it on camera for CBS Sports HQ there in Columbus. He will be giving us coverage all weekend here on CBS Sports HQ. Dennis, thank you very much. Coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to some of the biggest games of the weekend with our picks against the spread next.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.